I'm Peter, a poor student. It was so tough for me to get a job as a deliverer at an unsettled pizza store near my home. I'm not very interested in the fact that I'm going to work here permanently, but right now it's the best job I can find. One day, when I was on my shift as usual, and answer on behalf of the store owner. It was around 9 p.m. and it was just an hour before the shop was closed. A new order sound from the store's iPad rang. Damn it! Who the hell is ordering pizza now? But after that, I went ahead and opened the order to see. There was a customer ordering a large, thick pizza. The address was about 5 kilometers from my store. I immediately confirmed the order and read the note inside the app that after delivering to the place, please put pizza in front of the door and receive money in the slot. Although it was a bit confusing to understand, I quickly took the pizza and proceeded to deliver it in time. I was running through the busy traffic of the street at night looking for the right address in the hope of finishing my work as soon as possible. Until I found the address of the building. It was a dormitory area with no main doors but only an iron staircase built on the side of the building connected to the upper floors. I carefully locked the car parking at the bottom of the stairs and carried the food up. I searched for the right address, went to apartment 08. I knocked on the door for a while but no one answered. I started to doubt whether this was really a ridiculous joke of someone. At that time, I imagined that I would punch the guest on the face because of his trick. Fortunately, my patience has paid off. The door opened slowly, but no one came out. Money was neatly arranged in the door slot. At this moment, I just remembered the note inside the app. I quickly picked up the money, carefully counted it, then put the pizza box with a charge in front of the door for the eccentric guest and wished them good appetite. After that, I went downstairs and started the car to drive away. As soon as I got back to the store to return my car and uniform, I received an evaluation message from the system. The eccentric guest rated my delivery at 5 stars. In addition, there was no other compliment. Day by day I kept getting the same call from the same number all the time. The address not changed and even the way of the deliveries the same as the first. At first I seemed uncomfortable because of the cold attitude of the customer that he always left the money at the door, not even looking at me and greeting me just only one time, but gradually I felt familiar. For 4 days in a row I delivered this phone number and address, until the 5th time as usual. I rushed over and did my duty. But looking up from the bottom, I was quite surprised that standing in front of the door was a large group of people talking quite loudly. I didn't think it's my client's house. but unexpectedly everything I didn't want to happen always happened to me. An intense stench came from the house the customer had ordered from. It was like the smell of a dead rat's body, mixed with the smell of stinking food. When I looked inside, I saw in the middle of the house the body of an old big man lying with the face down on the floor. Police quickly appeared and conducted a scene examination. They carried the body of this man on a gurney. It was swelled up, its stench unbearable, because the body was filled with muckworms inside. However, it was so weird that the two arms of the man were absolutely severed. The police began to rummage the house to see if there was anything abnormal inside. Another policeman examined the pocket of the man and took out an old cell phone. They searched the diary and called the nearest phone number. Unknowingly, the store phone in my pocket rang loudly. I looked at the people with bewildered eyes and met the suspicious eyes of the neighbors and the police. I didn't even remember what I said at that time, because in my mind it was too stressful, especially when I was listed as a suspect of a murder case and the body was the one who ordered food at my store. When the police announced the autopsy results, the man had died 5 days ago. It was also the first day I received a delivery order to this evil address. There was a lot of absurdity between myself and the police. How can a dead person order a pizza? However, because there was no evidence to accuse me of murder, I was soon released by the police during the period of investigation. I was not allowed to go anywhere from my locality during this time. Fortunately, people in the store trusted me, so no one took me as a real killer. Until one day I received a letter from the police. They sent me an apology for misunderstanding me and wasting my time, as well as thanking me for cooperating with them to investigate the case. According to the first results, the man died of a heart attack. In the house, police also find a few of his medical records and a few bottles of heart attack medicine. But strangely, in his phone at that time, there was no number or contact information for relatives or anyone else. Police immediately proceeded to take testimony of neighbors living around the house. They said that the old man was an eccentric man. He lived alone in the moldy apartment and often locked himself in the house, not talking to anyone, and no one had ever seen his descendants visit him once. Occasionally, they also heard several voices coming from inside his home. I thought in my mind, maybe this man had multiple personalities, because I have heard people with this disease often have a bit of talking to their ego. The more I thought about it, the more I felt scared, especially when I thought of the person who ordered my pizza and asked me to deliver it to the house of a dead body. A few days later, I heard shocking news. After searching the man's apartment, the police discovered some strange small footprints appear inside, leading to the kitchen. Police also found a way leading into a perfectly covered small basement. In the basement, there was a big lack of light. The basement was also extremely humid and stinky. In the room, police found roughly a 13-year-old girl. She was discovered in a state of panic, severe traumatic trauma and frail physical condition due to long-term hunger. More terrifyingly, the police found many black bones in a corner of the basement. A shocking truth had been uncovered, that the man was a biological father. Since his wife left home, he had raised their daughter alone. This man did not allow her to leave the house. He said it was dangerous outside, strangers would harm her, and that only he loved her the most in the world. She was always locked inside that cellar. He only fed her, completely isolated her from the civilized world. Abusively, he sexually abused her. Each time she resisted or did something making him vexed, he immediately locked the girl into the basement. Until the day he had a heart attack and died. She opened up the cellar herself and went out. As soon as she came to the living room, she saw him lying there, so naive that she thought he was just sleeping. However, many days passed and he just laid there without talking or feeding her anymore. There are many scary things that I cannot explain. That after he died, the phone continued to order my store's pizza and also rated 5 stars as before. I thought it might have been because of the girl. Later on, because the phone ran out of battery, she couldn't order pizza anymore and ate the man. It's even more insane when I think it might be because the man's soul died suddenly, and he might think that he was alive and his soul was still doing the same job as when he was alive. But whatever the truth is, it was the most intimidating story I've ever seen in my delivery profession. Hello, I'm Egan. Perhaps all of us have a passion for football, but to me the ball is an unforgettable obsession. My family is Protestant, of course. I don't believe in evil, but my mind has changed since I had an incident in my last year of high school. From an early age, I have shown my athletic ability. Unlike other children, I enjoy playing underwater. That's why my parents signed me up for a swimming class. By the end of the elementary school, I mastered swimming. Of course, when I was in high school, although I was busier, I still didn't give up my passion. I joined a swimming club. To try my best, I also registered to compete in amateur competitions and luckily got some outstanding achievements. It can be said that I am a person who loves to challenge myself, so on a nice day I decided to pause swimming to switch to a new topic. With the permission of my parents, I joined Lion 2, a football club which was also quite famous in the school. Although I had to start everything at zero, I really liked that new feeling. I energetically asked my parents to buy me a super good pair of soccer shoes, but at the first training session I was allowed to sit on the bench and watch my team members play. Of course, the new shoes also did not step into any grass from the football field. I went home that day feeling very depressed. I remembered the feeling of being a star when I was at the swimming club. With football, I was nothing. But thanks to the encouragement of my family, I quickly regained my spirit. The enthusiasm to conquer my limits was arising again. At the second training session, luckily I was allowed to play and start being trained. It turned out that the new members were to sit on the bench to test their patience and will to learn, and that it was also an occasion to observe the old members and draw their own lessons. If I had given up the day before and not stayed to the team, I would probably be ashamed by now. At this training session, I began to realize I had a lot of limitations. Unlike swimming, training skills from childhood makes everything simpler. As for football, it was all new. When I watched the television, I thought the controlling ball was simple as spreading your arms and swimming, but the truth was, it was much harder. But instead of being bored and wanting to give up like the first day I came to the line too, I was more determined to conquer it. After practice sessions with the team, I usually stayed another 2 hours to review what I had learned and left when it was already dark. At first there were a few new numbers eager to join in practice, but gradually they gave up and eventually I was alone. But it was still fine. Practicing soccer alone made me more free and comfortable because no one could see me. I always believed that I was definitely the last to leave. However, one day I realized I was not the only one. I saw a figure who was training as hard as me in the opposite field. I thought in my mind, should I ask him to play with me? But after a few seconds of observing his professional playing style, I immediately erased that intention, because I thought that my slowness would annoy him a lot. The weird thing was that whenever I stayed late, I would see him. The boy in the opposite field even practiced extremely hard and enthusiastically without a moment of rest. Although I had met him many times, I still could not see the face of him, because that corner was quite dark. I had no idea why he didn't go to a brighter place to play football. But that was not what I cared about. The only thing I paid attention to was the ability to control the ball of a friend on the opposite field. As a newcomer to the Lion 2 team, I was not really sure if the person was in my club or not, but I could assure you that he was a very potential striker. Although I did not dare to approach or start talking to him, I did not know when the friend in the opposite field became the motivation to help me conquer the round ball. I had to confess that I had secretly followed that person and later learned many tricks. Thanks to that, my skills were improved much more. Many seniors in the club were extremely surprised by my progress. Although we have seen each other many times, but it was not until the night of the 8th or the 9th on the football field that I really had my first interaction with that friend in the opposite field. That day when I was practicing, I accidentally kicked the ball hard and it flew to the opposite side of the football field. Then I saw the ball rolling towards him. He stopped. I did not dare to speak. After 15 minutes, that weird friend started moving and went to the ball, picked it up and threw it to me. Somehow, his hand movements were very gentle, but the ball flew far away, over the high fence like kicking with his feet. I didn't really care about the weirdness. I hurriedly took my ball and thanked my friend at the opposite field, but the person didn't respond, coldly returning to continue his training. At that time, I simply thought that he must be eccentric, unapproachable. I put the ball in the bag and came back home because it was already dark. The next day, I practiced kicking the ball into the golf course, but my feet kept disobeying by kicking with the excess of strength. The ball continuously flew over the fence to the opposite field. Strangely, every time, the boy returned the ball to me without a complaint and of course didn't care at all about my thanks or hellos or goodbyes. That day, because the practice was too intense, it was not known at all hours. Luckily, I was near the entrance, so I figured it would be time to be locked up for the night. As I hurried up, cleaned up, I remembered my friend in the opposite field. Looking over, it turned out he was just like me, forgetting the closing time of the training ground. In order to repay his kindness, I immediately asked the security guard for 5 minutes more. So I walked towards that person. It seems that he also noticed that someone was approaching him and he stopped. Because he was standing in a light blocking position, so it was unable for a nearsighted person to see clearly from afar, I just relied on the shadow to follow the boy. But when I approached, I did not see the shadow of the person anymore. Looking over the side, I saw a ball rolling from the corner of the alley. A cold breeze from somewhere rushed and made the back of my spine unconsciously cool. I instinctively grabbed the rolling ball. As I hugged the ball, my head hit someone's chest. I did not expect this boy to have such a solid and tall body. However, that admiration was immediately suppressed when I looked upwards. I was startled when I found out the terrifying thing in front of me. The big man didn't have a head. Meanwhile, his body still moved like a normal person. He reached out his hand forward as if signaling me to give him the ball back. At this time, my body was trembling with fear. Sweat was drenched all over my shirt. My limbs were soft, teeth were clenched, trying to keep my mind as awake as possible. But as soon as he looked down, the calmness immediately reached its limit. The object in my hand right now was not a ball anymore, but a human head. Unable to suppress my emotions, I involuntarily let out a scream, then threw the head to the ground and my legs trembled backwards. But unfortunately, while I tried to escape, I stumbled on a barrier. The body that had lost all strength immediately fell down and lost consciousness after that. The next morning I woke up on my beloved bed. It took me a week to get rid of my obsession and return to normal. And on the first day back to school, I was summoned by the police to testify for a case. It turned out, after the day I lost consciousness in the football field, the people who worked there smelled the stench. After searching, they discovered a body crammed under an old warehouse containing the equipment of the soccer field in a state of decapitation. It seemed that the corpse was of a male student my age. The perpetrator was charged when police gathered enough evidence at the scene as well as verification based on cameras around the area. According to the police investigation, the victim was a member of the Lion 2 team and the male student was killed by his own team member because of a personal conflict. That incident became my obsession. I couldn't continue playing football nor return to swimming, partly because of these terrible things I've encountered. And I'm also a senior. I need to focus on my studies anyway. Hi, today I will tell you my own story. It could be said that it was my obsession during my college years, and it took me a lot of time to overcome that dark memory. I even lost my best friend. One day, students in my college were suddenly spreading rumors about a video posted on private groups of the college. In the video, there was a second-year female student in a nude state changing in the women's toilet. That's not all. I saw below in the comment section that there were obscene vulgar words and not very good comments about the girl's body. As for me, a simple person who doesn't like to gossip, I really do not care about this video at all. Not even bothering to join those secret groups despite having been at college for 2 years. As usual, after the class ended, I went down to the cafeteria for lunch. While walking, I took a phone call from Vera, my best friend. Today, Vera also had a class at the college, and we normally had lunch appointments at this time. Normally with my calls, Vera only takes about 5 seconds to pick up. But for some unknown reason, today I made 3 consecutive calls and still had not heard from Vera. Having a bad premonition, I hurriedly put my phone into my pocket and cycled straight to Vera's house. When I arrived, her mother said that since this morning Vera had locked herself in a room, refused to go to school, nor bothered to eat or drink, and her mom didn't know why. I asked permission for Vera's mother to come in, and then headed to my friend's room in bewilderment. The door was locked. There was no sound inside. I softly knocked on the door and called her. It took a long time for Vera to appear with a swollen face, messy hair. Seemingly she was crying. Seeing me, Vera hugged me in tears. I did not say nor ask anything because I knew letting her cry was the greatest comfort for her at that stage. After she calmed down, I asked my best friend about what happened. Vera wiped her tears away, sobbingly told me everything. It turned out that the victim in the toilet clip was Vera. She felt really hurt when her body was made fun of and talked about, and even insulted by all those people on the internet. Listening to her, my tears suddenly flowed. I hugged my friend tightly and comforted her. All afternoon I was with Vera, trying my best to persuade her to believe that everything will fall into oblivion and no one will even remember the video anymore. When talking to me, Vera's mood seemed to have stabilized. She also finished the glass of milk that her mother brought up. After Vera got better, I went back to school because I had 2 more classes left. I thought everything was fine, but unexpectedly, early in the morning, I suddenly received a call from Vera's house, announcing that Vera had taken sleeping pills to kill herself last night. She was severely depressed because of the video and the obscene comments about herself, so she eventually sought death to free herself. Her passing was a huge shock to her mother and me. After the death of my best friend, it took me more than a month to overcome my pain and stabilize my mood. I informed the college about what that pervert was doing, filming people, including the consequences he caused, but it seemed that the college still had no action to resolve this incident. And then, that disgusting thing happened to me. One afternoon, we had swimming lessons. After the class ended, the whole class stayed in the school pool until late at night to have fun and practice some more. So I came home that night at 7 o'clock. And it was about 9 p.m. when I remembered that I left my phone in the dressing room next to the pool. After the security's consent, I rushed to the dressing room next to the pool. It wouldn't have been anything special if I hadn't accidentally discovered a stranger hidden in the dressing area. I should have immediately gone back after I got the phone, but my tough-hearted nature forced me to look out for who it was. I gathered up my courage, carefully took each step silently, and tried not to make a sound. When I got closer, I saw a man in a black top who was stealthily putting the camera in the girls' changing room. My whole body was trembling, but still trying to keep calm, my hand holding my mouth, trying not to scream. Then carefully I hid under the stairs to avoid being detected. I have never felt so nervous and worried like in this moment. My heart was beating so fast, I could not even breathe. Holding the phone while non-stop trembling, I picked up the phone to take a photo of the pervert, but I forgot to turn off the sound of the phone. A click sounded. The pervert immediately discovered my presence. Oh, my mind was empty. I couldn't think anymore. I clumsily dropped the phone and ran away. Behind me, the black hooded pervert was also frantically chasing me, not giving me a chance to escape. When my strength became exhausted, when my legs were about to collapse from running, I was lucky to see a nearby storage warehouse, and I rushed inside and closed the door. Then gradually retreated to a corner of the old wet room, which was full of cockroaches, centipedes and spider webs. A dark space covered me, while outside was the sound of the door banging and cursing of the pervert. The fear had taken over my mind. All I could do was to sit still and pray. A moment later, all of a sudden, everything became silent. I thought that the bad guy had left. But unexpectedly, a loud noise rang, interrupting my thoughts. The pervert was using an axe to shatter the door. Seeing the sharp iron axe, I could no longer calm down. I panicked and shouted. But my scream could not stop the door from being gradually destroyed. I knew at that moment I had to be really alert so that I was able to find a solution. The luck again came to me. After looking around the old room, I found a ventilated hatch cover. After that, I lifted my body, opened the hatch and climbed inside. Though I did not know this tunnel would lead to somewhere, but this was my only and last hope. Because the tunnel was small, I had to move with both my arms and legs. Use my best to crawl as quickly as possible in a dark and dusty hole. The fear and tightness made it impossible for me to breathe. But thinking about Vera, thinking about the people who were perverted by the bad guy, I gained the motivation to keep going forward. When I was able to move a bit, I heard from behind me something starting to make noises. It seemed that the pervert had found out and was chasing me through the hole. The closer the noise got, the fear in me grew bigger and bigger. Sweat drenched all over my shirt. My arms, my knees began to hurt, and there were some scratches and blood leaking out. Besides, my body gradually ran out of energy. The moment all of my willpower faded away in the dark tunnel, a light suddenly flashed. I took a deep breath, used the last remaining energy, quickly crawled to where the light was coming from. Fortunately, the end of the tunnel was the outside hall of the college. To be honest, at that time my body had no energy, but I tried to stay awake, trying to get up with my will and rush to run for help. After a while, the security guard and 2 convenience store staff members next to him followed my instructions, and the pervert was also arrested. The funny thing was that he was too fat and stuck in the ventilation tunnel. Otherwise, I couldn't know what would happen to me. After that, the police were present that took him to the police headquarters. At the police station, the pervert had confessed all of his depraved behavior, and the evidence that could never be more true for his crimes was the camera in the dressing room. When checking his personal computer, it contained all the data about the ill-fated victims and videos that had claimed Vera's life. After that horrible night, it took a long time for me psychologically to return to normal. But no matter what, that dark memory seemed to be an obsession throughout all my life. I'm Rowan, I've transferred to Wuhan, China, lived and worked in a technology company for more than 2 years. Currently, I live in an apartment located in the heart of the city. I'm the only foreigner living in the apartment. This led me to be afraid of talking with neighbors because of the language barrier. As you might know, the new strain of coronavirus originated from Wuhan before outbreaking as a global pandemic and threatening not only poor countries, but also powerful countries in the world. Especially in Europe, COVID-19 epidemic has grown uncontrollably and killed hundreds, thousands of lives. It was so unfortunate for me to live in the center of the pandemic. I tried to minimize the number of times going out of my home these days. The whole of my apartment building had to be isolated at home. One day, all of a sudden, I was forced to go to a centralized isolation area with many of my neighbors after the police arrested an elderly woman showing signs of the acute pneumonia epidemic. Her family lives on the 4th floor, which is one floor below my apartment. Just like many others, I was forced to temporarily quit my job at the company and quarantined at home. It was not good to live without income. It was even worse that we were in the high-risk group suspected of being infected by the epidemic. Unfortunately for us, the woman was sent for testing and concluded to be positive with the coronavirus a few days later. This news immediately alarmed all of the residents living in the apartment. It was also the time when the epidemic outbreak. Every day, data on people infected with the virus, people dying from the epidemic, and recommendations appeared everywhere on the newspapers and television channels. Ambulance sirens were loud all over the streets. The morgue had no room to accommodate. The funeral service had to be closed due to overload. Human life became extremely fragile. That made it possible for me and the other people in the suspect group to sleep. However, it didn't stop there. A few days later, I received more shocking news about the woman infected with the coronavirus. A man in the quarantine area said that he shared the elevator with that woman in the previous day. He and some people felt uncomfortable because of her impolite actions. She coughed and spit indiscriminately in public, but they were just keeping the discomfort in their hearts without saying it because they never thought that she was positive for coronavirus. Moreover, a few days ago when returning from work, some people happened to see the woman peeping at a door, holding the door handle while there was no intention of opening it. But everyone thought that maybe she went to the wrong room, so they just turned a blind eye. Some people in the quarantine area said that the police quickly went to the security building. According to the data extracted from the security cameras, the woman had committed very inhumane actions. Since she knew that she had signs of infection, she was in despair and came up with a plan to spread the disease to all the inhabitants of the apartment building because the wicked woman wanted that everyone must suffer the same pain and despair as herself. Every day she deliberately smeared her drool on the elevator dials, on the stairs, at the door handles of each household. Even when she knew she had signs of the disease, the woman was still acting completely normal, not wearing a mask nor the necessary equipment to protect other people. Seeing the actions of the evil woman on the security camera of the building, everyone was shivering. Worse, she was also the chef of the cafeteria below the apartment. While cooking, she deliberately disobeyed the kitchen's rules, not wearing the drop-proof mask as usual. Even in some corners of the camera, the woman was seen spitting on the food before serving the guests. Performing a sinful action, her face was still as cold as ice without any emotion. Hearing this information, all the residents who had stopped at the cafeteria of the apartment for a meal were horrified. Certainly some of them would be infected with the disease, I'm sure of it. At that time, residents of the apartment building and I were thrilled every day waiting for our test results. A number of people began to show symptoms like coughing, high fever and shortness of breath. but only a few of them were lucky enough to be referred for treatment because hospitals were overcrowded. In the centralized quarantine area, we had body temperature and health checks anytime and anywhere, regularly on 3 meals, but all of us wore a sad face. People were more aware of wearing medical masks and gloves. It could be said that the greatest motivation for us to gain more strength to overcome this crisis was the image of the doctors and nurses, the guardians who were with us every day. They also wore thick and hot protective suits, not to mention all of them had to work day and night, struggling to fight the disease. In spite of their tiredness, they were always happy and even encouraged us. Luckily, I was negative for the disease. After more than 1 month of isolation, I was allowed to go back home. It was a scary story I encountered a few months ago, and currently the epidemic in Wuhan was under control, but the situation seemed extremely tense in Europe and especially my hometown. It could be considered as an uncontrollable one. I would say that I was extremely worried about my relatives and friends in the UK. I was not really satisfied with their subjective attitude before. When the epidemic was raging in Wuhan, China, even when they were the first victims of infection in the UK, people did not change their attitudes and views. On the streets, no one was wearing masks. The shops were still crowded, people still embraced each other as if nothing had happened. In short, no one consciously protects himself from the threat of the disease. Even my parents and siblings were teased because of wearing masks and gloves when on the road. As you know, living in an environment with less pollution and smog, it's understandable that Europeans like us don't need and don't have the habit of wearing masks. Besides, people think that someone who wears a mask is sick or has health problems. And if you are not sick but wearing a mask will certainly be teased and ridiculed. No exception, I also used to have that idea. But since the coronavirus has grown into a pandemic, I've changed my mind. And at least I was aware of the importance of wearing a mask before things got worse. But unfortunately, most of the citizens in the UK do not wear masks. As the death toll rose to thousands, people began to rush to buy masks and hand sanitizers, leading to a serious shortage. I've never seen the Big Ben Tower or the Tower Bridge spanning across the Thames River that deserted. The hotels were also closed because there were no tourists. All were leveling off due to the epidemic. In hospitals, the corpses were laid close together in the morgue because there was not enough space for burial. The ambulance was noisy every day, and people have never been able to meet their loved ones one last time through a video call for only 5 minutes. More than anyone else at this moment in a faraway place, I was always hopeful that a miracle can happen. The disease will end, and I can return home. My name is Peter. There was a horrifying story about the freaky strangers who broke into my house. And I think that I was blessed to survive and to be here telling you about that scary story. It was on a weekend of August 2019. I was watching TV and my sister was on the second floor studying for a final exam. While I was watching my favorite cartoon, suddenly there was a tremendous crash along with the sound of broken glass at the back of my house. I was startled. Then I left the couch. At the same time, my sister was walking down the stairs. Luna was curious about what was happening too. She made a signal with her finger, shh, telling me not to make a sound. Then she moved forward and I followed her. Both of us walked toward the back of the house. Luna was holding a baseball bat on her hand while I was reaching to get my favorite slingshot as a self-defense weapon of my own. I felt a little bit insecure, but at least my sister was a master of karate. Since there is a forest behind our house, We assumed that it might be the trees that knocked down by the wind that broke the glass. Or worse, it could possibly be a wild animal that attacked our house. As we were moving, the lights went out. Luna stepped back and pushed me down. Suddenly, in the pitch of dark, there was a beam of light. Luna and I knew that it was the fridge, and that the light was from the fridge. As we moved closer, we saw a man devouring a gigot which had just taken out from the fridge. Luna and I gaped at the scene of blood trickling down from the gigot to all over his mouth and his hands. The light emitted from the fridge made his face look even more hideous. The lightning helped us to see his face clear. That was a man with untidy hair and a bushy beard. We almost barely breathed. But suddenly the lightning flashed outside. That freaky man turned around and he saw us. We stood there and were not able to utter a word. But right after that, he appeared to be scared and ran out of the house via the broken glass. I hurriedly called our neighbors for help while Luna dashed into the storehouse to fetch a shotgun. I made many phone calls, but no one received it. I was afraid whether my neighbors got killed. As I continued to make phone calls, hoping they may answer, there was a loud noise from the front of my house, followed by a power cut again. That must be someone breaking the front door to get in. Oh, being so scared, Luna grabbed my hand and dragged me fast to the basement. Then closed the lid of the basement right after that. Underneath the humid basement, Luna and I nestled against each other, eyes staring at the stairs of the basement, praying not to get caught by those freaky strangers. We did not dare to breathe hard. At first, I heard the footstep right above our heads, and then there were one or two more footsteps. It was not until then that I could figure out that there were more than 3 of them. I could not imagine how terrible it could be if they caught us. Suddenly, I heard voices emitted from the floor above, like a conversation between 2 of them, but in a language that I could not understand. I just assumed that one of them was speaking in French. The other one is speaking in the way as if he was an Asian. After that was the sound of breaking and rummaging. Being quiet for about 10 minutes, my fear seemed to grow. I whispered in Luna's ear that they might have gone, but Luna signaled me to stay here and wait. Suddenly, the lid of the basement shook violently, and then there was the sound of axe cutting the basement lid. Luna grabbed the shotgun and aimed at the lid. They had figured out that we were here. After that, there was a gunfire. Then we heard the sound of someone talking. I realized that it was Tom, our neighbor's voice. Then Luna and I breathed a sigh of relief. The lid was open, and he said, "Everything is all right." We happily ran and hugged him. Luna burst into tears because of fear. Later after that, I just knew that when John saw my missed phone calls, he sensed that something was wrong and something was happening, so he dashed to our house. Then he shot one of the strangers. The others had left for the forest, he said. The police conducted an examination around the area and told us they suspected 3 strangers might be the human traffickers that they had been hounding. Recently, police were taking action to take control of illegal immigration and human trafficking. Thus, there might be many people hiding in the forest. I was also told about the case of the migrants smuggling into the UK in a refrigerated truck container, and all of them died because of suffocation. That's such a tragic scene. I continued to look up for cases of illegal immigrations on the internet. Most of the migrants are the Asians. They could be murdered, beat, and left starving by the human traffickers.
I wonder when would human trafficking and illegal immigration end?